So this morning I wanted to talk a little bit about content area literacy, disciplinary literacy, and what I mean by text in this class in hopes that it provides a little bit of clarification as you move forward with your text set and start thinking about your lesson plans for this class. So for the Common Core State Standards, if we look at the ELA standards, we'll see that the authors emphasized 5 instructional shifts as you move to the standards. The first one is on reading of complex informational text, and so having students starting to read informational text in kindergarten and then up through high school. The idea that the knowledge of the disciplines is important and that students need to be aware of the fact that each discipline approaches text differently. Focusing on evidence from the text, so when you are responding to a question, being able to cite evidence from the text in order to answer it. The idea of critical and analytical writing, so thinking about opinion and then argumentative writing, and then academic vocabulary. We know that disciplinary text can be difficult for students because in the past, students have a lot of experience with narrative text and the idea of story grammar, so that we have a story with a setting, characters, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. We also know that students struggle with vocabulary instruction and that vocab needs to be taught in context. Students sometimes struggle with decoding disciplinary text. They struggle with comprehension, and so we need to teach them comprehension strategies. And then sometimes they don't have background knowledge about the content, and so then we need to build their background knowledge before they access the text. If you look at this pyramid here, you'll see that there are 3 levels of literacy instruction. Your basic literacy instruction is what you learned in early block. So it's the phonics, the phonemic awareness. You then have intermediate literacy, which is also called content area literacy, and then disciplinary literacy, that where all the different disciplines approach reading and writing a little bit differently according to how they access language and text structure, etc. So we'll look at that a little bit closer in a minute. So if we think about content area literacy and disciplinary literacy, we can think of them as 2 different approaches to teaching literacy instruction, and they're both valid and both wonderful approaches that need to be utilized in the classroom. So general information about content area lit. Content area lit is generalized approaches to develop better readers in order to understand the content. And so content area literacy originally was developed as study skills to help our students access textbooks, and this was in the early 1900s. These strategies are implemented across the disciplines, and they focus on generic reading processes or strategies, like summarizing, questioning, and inferencing. Disciplinary literacy, then, is a discipline-specific approach to show students how reading and writing are uniquely used in the discipline being studied. And so the primary focus then is on language and text demands, and it's a real focus on a specialized process in the discipline, such as sourcing, generating a claim, or justifying a claim, or generating a hypothesis in science. So when we think about text then in this class, we think about text as something that is any communication product. So we think about it very broadly. So these can be speeches, audio tapes, essays, stories, articles, illustrations, films, graphs, charts, tables. And when we think about informational text, because your text set sources do need to be informational, you can think about them in 2 different ways: historical, scientific, and technical text, and literary nonfiction. And so literary nonfiction are things like biographies and autobiographies. Those historical, scientific, and technical texts are books about history, social studies, science, the arts, graphs, forms, charts, maps, directions, and these can be either print or digital. Literary nonfiction is an informational text that is used in the discipline of ELA. It's also called creative nonfiction, narrative nonfiction, or fact-based fiction. So it communicates information in a way that reads like fiction. So this again is like a biography, a political or personal essay, or a character sketch. Historical, scientific, and technical texts are also a type of nonfiction about the natural or social world. These can also be various graphical devices and again show up in various formats and lengths. So disciplinary literacy then is the knowledge of the unique protocols for each discipline. We know from research that historians, scientists, mathematicians, etc., all approach text from unique perspectives. And this research was established or started to become noticeable in the early 1900s with reading educators and developmentalists, and then in the 1950s came about again with Jerome Bruner's work, and then in the 80s and 90s started showing up in cognitive psychology, and now today a lot of it is being done in the literacy world. So we can see here examples of successful reading in various disciplines, and if you look at the history and social studies side, you'll see that sourcing, contextualization, and corroboration are three of the choices you have for your disciplinary literacy lesson plan. And then you also see here for science, thinking about data analysis, hypothesis, observation, investigation, graphics, charts, formulas, facts based on evidence. These are all ways that scientists read text and think about text. In math, we pay attention to words and symbols. Interpretation of information is presented in unusual ways. So we have things like proofs, we have equations, the importance of mathematical modeling and problem solving, and then in ELA, focusing on story elements, thinking about literal meaning versus implied meaning of a story, thinking about theme and text structure, and also the different genres that we see in English language arts. So disciplinary literacy then refers to the specialized ways of knowing and communicating in the different disciplines to make meaning, and so that students need to be taught specialized routines. So when we think about disciplinary reading, the focus is on the specialized problems and processes of a subject area. So when you start looking at your text set information, you'll see that you have some choices there for your fourth lesson plan in regards to disciplinary reading for science and for social studies that you'll need to choose from that fits with your topic. So I invite you to look at these references for more information on disciplinary literacy, and we'll be diving more into this deeply as we continue throughout the semester.